Hi, this is Pat Cosgrove welcoming you to Cosgrove's Cosmos. Today we're going to set up my new galaxy scope, the Sharpstar SCA260 V2. Let's get started. I finished construction of my Whispering Skies Observatory in early April. I soon had all the telescopes set up and ready to go for first light on April 22nd. This included my new galaxy scope, which was installed and ready for use. I've already posted a blog on setting up this scope, but I wanted to do a video as well, and I haven't had a chance until recently. In this video, I'll go over the scope itself, and I'll talk about what I did to configure it for use. My original plan was not to get this scope until towards the end of this year or maybe into next year. After all, I just finished building my observatory, and that pretty much consumed any free budget I had for astro goodies. But with all the tariff nonsense going on, there was a real fear that waiting would cause a significant price increases. So my wife and I talked, and we decided to jump ahead, buy it now, get it configured, and avoid all that tariff nonsense. So let's start by taking a look at the scope itself. I ordered the telescope from Agena Astro, who had them in stock, and 5 days later, it arrived very well packaged in a double thickness box. Once unpackaged, the scope itself was pretty impressive. It was beautifully made, the machining was nicely done, the finishes were nicely done. It really gave the impression of a superior piece of equipment. The dovetail was well engineered, and the plate that was mounted on the top had a lot of convenient slots and holes, which would make it very easy to mount various pieces of equipment. The secondary looked pretty sturdy with solid vanes attaching it to the tube. Included with the scope was a Cheshire eyepiece 1 1/4 inch diameter to aid in collimation. Unfortunately, there was no visual back included with the telescope, so how do you mount it? Fortunately, I had a couple of roto locks from Williams Optics. I really like these for this particular purpose because as you tighten them, they tighten concentrically and keep the eyepiece perfectly centered, which is just what you want for an alignment eyepiece. The focuser was large and massive, though a bit stiff in the action. It was very smooth, and I could detect no slop in the system whatsoever. I felt pretty good that putting even a heavy camera on this would do very well.
I'm getting ready to put on the EAF focuser, and I've got the coupler on. Here's the focuser, and here's my problem. I can't really get in here to put this on because the handle's in the way. So I think the handle is going to have to come off, at least temporarily. I've now removed the handle. All I needed was a 3mm Allen wrench to take that off. Now I've got plenty of clearance to be able to mount this. And once I have this mounted, I should be able to fit the handle right back on. Now I've got the coupler attached both to the focuser here and the EAF here. And these are the two screw holes that I'm going to be using to mount the bracket. According to Sharpstar, these two are available for use for this particular focuser. So let's put the bracket in and attach the EAF to it. So I've mounted the bracket loosely onto the EAF, and I want to now mount this onto the actual focuser. This first hole here and these last two are the ones that are designated as available for the mounting of the EAF. This bracket, as you can see, clearly is not going to make that. So I'm going to have to try to put the one in right here and just see how solid that is. I'm not happy about that, but none of these other holes appear to be available for use in mounting this. So the information I had is a little bit misleading. I got it mounted with a single screw. It's really quite solid. It seems like it would be okay. I'm still a little bit nervous about just having this mounted with one screw. Now the one other hole that's available right there is the locking hole. That's the one the lock nut was in originally. Now usually once you put a focus motor on, the torque of the motor, even unplugged, is what keeps it from moving, so you don't really need that. I'm thinking if I have a problem with keeping this where I want it, what I could do is take the screw that does fit here, grind it down so that when I tighten it, it doesn't come in contact with the bottom plate here, which is what locks it. And then I could do that. But for right now, I'm going to try it this way and see how it works out. Again, a little bit uncomfortable with this, but certainly does seem solid right now. We have the EAF in, I've mounted the handle back on. It does clear. Doesn't clear by a lot, but it does clear. It does come with a right angle USB connector. And I can get that in, although it is putting a little stress on the connector. I may switch over to a straight connector in here just to avoid that. But that part's done. Here's my project for today. I need to have an optical capture assembly for my SCA260 V2 platform, and I'm going to go with an ASI2600MM-Pro camera. I'm going to couple that with a ZWO electronic filter wheel, which is a 7x36 unmounted. I'm going to be using the ZWO OAG-L for my off-axis guiding, and then I need a guide camera, and for that I'm going to have an ASI174MM-Mini. All this has to be assembled into one unit, and of course then I need to mount the unmounted filters. For LRGB, I'm going to be using 36mm unmounted ZWO filters, and then I went with Astronomics for my narrowband filters. These are 6nm wide cuts. These are a good value in filters. I've used them before with great success. While they're unmounted, they do have a metal mount on the outside, but it does not change their effective aperture. So I'll be putting this all together today so I can mount this on my new telescope. These are all the parts I have to play with. These are the parts here that came with the camera itself. There's an Allen wrench. There's some adapters, another adapter, and several sets of cables. With the electronic filter wheel, we have some hardware, some screws. We have filter covers. We have a dark sheet for there's actually two, I think, in there for the front and back for the mounting directly to the camera. There's a couple of adapters here and a cable. And with the OAG, basically you have the unit itself, some screws, and yet another Allen wrench. Now my plan here for all of this is to bolt this guy directly to the face of the camera, bolt this guy to the other side of that, take the tilt adapter here, and have that on the far side of that. And somewhere in there, we're going to have to open things up and mount the actual filters.
First, we removed the tilt plate from the camera using the Allen wrench included with the camera. Next, we removed the top plate for the EFW. I'm using my power screwdriver to make this a little bit easier because there are quite a few screws. With the cover off, we can now see the filter wheel itself, which I'm now going to remove by taking out the 3 tiny screws which hold it in. First placing the light gasket on top of the camera, then putting the EFW on top of that, there are 4 screw holes which will line up that allow everything to be bolted together. It's not easy. Trying to get all 3 things aligned can be a little tricky, and I cut out a lot of video where I had frustration in getting that done. With the screws now in place, we can tighten things up. With this step complete, I now put the camera face down on the desk to keep any dust from wandering in. Next, we're going to attach the off-axis guider to the other plate on the EFW. In order to do that, we have to remove the tilt plate from the off-axis guider so that we can access the screw holes inside that will be used to mount it to that plate. Once again, we have the joy of taking the light gasket material, placing it on the plate, then trying to line up the off-axis guider holes through that stack. Again, this looks and sounds like it ought to be simple, but in practice it was a little twitchy. Once these are bolted together, we can reattach the tilt plate. Now is a really good time to test how everything is lining up. So I dry fit the plate back onto the EFW, and shining a light in, we can see where the prism from the off-axis guider is sitting relative to the camera sensor.
The prism was sticking down too far and blocking the sensor. In order to adjust it, I used the Allen wrench to loosen the screw right in here, then move the prism up, then lock that screw once again. So now we're going to check and see what the alignment looks like. All right, got it on. Let's get a light on there. All right, that looks pretty good. That's not touching the sensor at all. A little bit of buffer there. And we're still within the clear aperture of that open ring. So I think we're okay. Okay, next I'm going to mount the filters into the filter holder. I have the filter holder out of the EFW unit, so this is a good and convenient time to do that. For each filter, we'll be putting it into place. Then we have retainment rings, which go over the filter, and these screws will be screwing them in place. Now this is really sensitive to do right, so I'm not even going to try to video myself while I'm doing it. I just wanted to introduce what I would be doing, and then I'll take some pictures and some video between each step because it's just too delicate an operation to be distracted. I now have all the filters sitting in the ring. The first filter's in here. LRGB for ZWO. Used to be you had to figure out which side was the coded side so you could point it in an appropriate orientation, but I couldn't tell the difference between both sides this time. And as I did more research, apparently the new generation of filters, you no longer have to do that. So those are just sitting in there. The other three are my narrowband filters here. These are astronomics. Astronomics are coded anti-reflection on both sides, so it doesn't matter what the orientation is. Now the delicate operation of putting these rings in. These can get a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'll share the results later. The rings for the LRGB filters went in pretty well because they sit flush. However, the astronomics are a little bit thicker. As you can see, they pop up in here. And getting those in was a little bit tricky. I found that one of the things that made this a little bit easier to work with is using a very fine needle nose pliers to hold the small screws in position as you're trying to get them started. But I now have all the filters in. What I'm going to do now is blow off the filters, brush off all the dust that has gotten on there as I've worked on them, make sure there's nothing on the sensor, and begin to put this back together. Okay, I now have the filter wheel back into the housing. And it's been screwed in with these tiny little screws. I'm going to take one more pass and try to remove any dust that's possibly there, and then I'm going to start putting on the outer lid. Okay, I've got the cover secured back on, and now I'm going to mount the camera and put something in here to plug this opening until I mount it on the telescope.
Here we have the final assembled camera subsystem, ready for installation on the telescope. I had done several blog posts where I considered what was the appropriate mount for the new telescope, and in the end I chose the Ioptron CEM70. I ordered the mount, an extra counterweight, and an Ioptron top pier plate, which I adapted to fit on the top of my steel piers. I'd already done this for my two CEM60s and knew this was a good path forward. After mounting the two CEM60 mounts that I have, it was easy to set up the CEM70 and get it ready to put on the pier. After setting the latitude for my location, it was straightforward to put the counterweights on, and now I was ready for mounting the actual optical tube assembly.
Just lugged this beast up the hill, brought it in the observatory and set it down on my mobile cart, which is turning out to be really handy as I'm taking scopes up and off the mounts. I'm getting ready to install this on my new CEM70 and start getting things organized. Before I do that, I like to do something on the Losmandy rail. I like to put one of these things, clamp it on the end, so that as a single person handling a heavy scope and I slide it down into the groove here, I don't have to worry about slipping and falling all the way through. It acts as a safety brake. And then as I'm balancing, I can figure out the right position for it. I can use that as a reference so that when I remove the tube assembly from the mount, when I put it back on, I haven't lost my balance point. So we're going to do that next. I've now turned the telescope upside down, and I took one of my Losmandy clamps, a little bit different one than I was going to use, but this one, clamped it on right at the end of the rail nice and tight, so as I slide this in, I don't have to worry about going too far. I got the scope up there. It's a little heavy for one person, a little awkward, but I managed to get it up there. And again, this thing saved me because as it's sliding down, it catches, and then it gave me a chance to get in here and really tighten these down nice and tight. Now, this isn't the right position for it. I have to do some balancing, so I'm going to try to do that next. I've now balanced the declination axis, and then I move this clamp back down to preserve where that spot is, but we're balanced pretty well now. Now the next trick will be to get these balanced out for the right ascension axis. Now I got a pretty good balance on the right ascension. Glad I got the extra weight, definitely need it for this particular telescope. This balancing is pretty rough because I'm going to be adding cables and other things on, but I wanted to put something on so that the mount wasn't stressed. But now I have enough that I can start to go forward.
When I originally mounted the scope, I had an old camera, a 1600 base camera. This allowed me to do the polar alignment and a few other things, but once I got the new camera stack put together, I mounted it and you can see it in place here. The one thing I should note is if you look at the guide camera, it seems to be riding a little high. It still has the extension tube on there, and I ended up having to take that off in order to come to focus, so that is riding a little high from what you see right now. And USB is mostly going to the back there. I'm feeding the guide camera back and the electronic filter wheel back. So this one whole unit is then connecting back into the hub of the CEM70 for USB distribution. I also have a ZWO EAF unit that's bolted in, fits in a little bit tight there. And this is running into my USB box, my USB hub, so that I can connect everything together. Coming around this side, on the top, I have the Pegasus Astro Powerbox Mini. This is primarily adding additional DC distribution and also is the smarts and power behind my dew strap, which I'm putting on the back here around the main mirror cell. Connected to the top here is a fairly heavy-duty USB 3.0 hub, which is powered, and everything is coming in through that. Got some wire wrap coming down here, and then cables going to the computer, which is mounted on the pier right now, and down to power. Shortly after shooting the previous video, I 3D printed a new mounting bracket for the computer, and you can see the arrangement here. The new bracket is in red. So now let me do a slow walk around of the entire rig so you can get a feel for the various ways things are configured here, and you can pause the video if you want to note something of detail. When I came to focus the new setup, I found that I could not do that. No matter what I did, I couldn't seem to get the stars in focus. I couldn't even see the stars. So I shined a light down the tube and saw what I was imaging, and it was obvious that the filter wheel was in between locations. That wasn't right. I tried to set a new filter location, and I got an error. So something was wrong, and shortly after that, I took the camera off to take a look and see what was going on. So I took the camera off, and this is what I saw. You can see the filter is not in the right position at all.
So I have a problem with my filter wheel. It doesn't seem to be positioning properly, and when I tell it to go to a particular filter, it searches and searches and doesn't seem to find it. So I'm using ASI Studio. We'll now just connect it. It's trying to go to filter 1. It rotates, it rotates, it rotates. Can't find it. And I get this error message here. So, since it's moving freely, and it uses an IR sensor to do the right location, I'm assuming there was something wrong with the sensor. At this point, I thought I just had a bad unit. So I reached out to Gina Astra, where I had purchased it, for some help. They were very responsive. After talking about what my symptoms were, they agreed that I probably had a bad unit, but they asked if I would do a few tests just to verify a couple of things before they sent a new unit out. So I was happy to do that. As soon as I opened their document, I pretty much realized what had happened. Prominently displayed was a picture of the EFW with the cover off. And as I looked at the wheel, it was pretty obvious that I could see the wheel numbers printed on the wheel. I remember when I had my cover off before I wrapped things up, I could not see those same numbers, and I realized I had the wheel in backwards. My idiocy now revealed, I went on to try the fix. I removed the cover, flipped over the wheel, and as you can see in the video, everything was working fine afterward. But as I studied this a little bit further, I'm afraid this is probably a self-inflicted wound. I believe I have the filter wheel installed backwards from what it should be. You should be able to see the numbers on it, and I put it in such that I don't see the numbers. And I think this is misaligning the holes used by the sensors to do positioning. So we're going to see if we can't rotate or flip this around and see if that corrects the problem. Okay, I flipped the wheel around so that you can now see the numbers and the filters are on top as it should be. And now when I connect to it, it seems to see all filters. It does the calibration just fine. Let's just do a test. We're on filter 7 right now. Let's go to filter 3 or 2. There it goes, and you can see it's right over the camera, and we have 2 where it's positioned. So here's the fundamental piece of guidance here. When you put the electronic filter wheel back together, it's probably a good idea to put the wheel in the right way. It will go in the wrong way and things won't work right. So learn from my mistake. All right, got things back together. Let's just make sure everything is still rotating freely. We're gonna go to a new filter. Okay, it seemed to be working. Once I had proven that was the issue, I knew I had to get back and close the loop with the Gina Astro. I felt pretty dumb having realized that the problem that I was describing to them was one that I had inflicted on myself. So I was ready to eat humble pie, and I sent them the following note. Hi John, sometimes I can be quite selfless. I do things for the betterment of the broader astronomy community. For example, what would happen if some moron accidentally installed a filter wheel into an EFW backwards? Since most people have not tried this, I decided I would give it a go to broaden the base of knowledge out there. Yes, you can install the wheel backward. It fits just fine and it spins freely. However, the fiducial holes in the wheel no longer align with the IR sensor, and the system cannot determine its position. Flip the wheel and everything works fine. Now you know, and you are welcome. Actually, your documents clued me into the fact that the wheel was installed backwards. Duh, my bad. Thanks for your help. All looks good now. This was his response, which caused me to chuckle a bit too. I thought it was rather big of me to make these kinds of errors for the benefit of others, mind you. After all this, I was pretty much ready to go. I had set up the computer I was going to be using to control the telescope. I installed Nina on it and had it configured for everything it needed to know to work with the 260, and I was ready for first light. So I chose M106 for my first target. It's a galaxy that's not overly large, but it's not overly small, so I thought it was a good shot. I did 10 hours, and I had LRGB data, including some hydrogen alpha, which I folded in. And this is the resulting image. I thought this was a pretty good result for a first test on the system, and I know things will be optimized as I go forward. I can't wait for the clouds and the smoke to finally clear. I'm really excited to have the SCA260 ready for use, and I can't wait to get more experience with it. So with that thought, this is Pat Cosgrove signing off for Cosgrove's Cosmos, wishing you clear skies, no smoke, and excellent seeing.